You're struggling with the next skill in your business because you're skipping steps, and your employees are having trouble learning because they're skipping steps. So in this video, I'm going to teach you a specific method that makes you learn any skill that requires a series of steps, which is known as a linear skill set. A linear skill set could be anything from the skill of sales to product development to the ability to play chess or the violin or anything that requires a journey of multiple steps that all have to be done in sequence. If you don't know how to learn linear skill sets efficiently, you will waste years of your life trying to make progress on the wrong thing. My name is Josh Terry. I built a 2 million person audience teaching learning theory, and I help founders learn how to learn until they become unstoppable. Whether you're running a $50 million business, learning to play the violin, or trying to reach enlightenment, it's all the same process. Here's how it works. A linear skill set is anything that occurs in steps. You do one thing, then the next, and the next. Almost everything on earth that you want to do contains at least one and sometimes many combined linear skill sets. Building a marketing funnel, making a sale, creating an ascension process to get people to buy more than once, building a coaching program that actually gets people to change behavior. Running a business itself contains potentially millions of combinations of linear skill sets, all of which requires this process of doing one thing, the next, and the next. If you don't know how to get good at doing the one thing, the next, and the next, you'll never be able to cook a pancake, and you'll never be able to close a multi-million-dollar business deal. Most people focus on the specific skill they're working on, but understanding how to get good at one thing, the next, and the next is the skill of skill itself. And it's the master key for being good at business and life. So let's start with what most people do wrong when trying to learn something. Most people approach a linear skill set like this. They learn step 1, then step 1 and 2, then step 1, 2, and 3. If you're learning to make a sale, for example, first you learn how to break the ice. Then you learn how to break the ice and identify the need. Then break the ice, identify the need, and present the offer. This feels like progress, but here's the problem. Every time you practice, you start from the beginning, which means you're drilling the early steps over and over while the later steps barely get any reps. By the time you reach step 4 or 5, you're tired, you're deep into the sequence, and that's the moment you need to perform your weakest skill. So your opener is polished, but your close falls apart, and it seems like it takes a really long time to improve it. Think about it like this. You're learning a piece of music that has 100 notes, and you keep messing up on note 99. So what do? You start over from the beginning, you play note 1 through 98 perfectly, hit note 99, mess it up, and start over again. You're not practicing note 99. You're practicing notes 1 through 98 over and over again while 99 stays broken. Same thing happens in business. You make a business card. You make marketing material. You try to get a sale. It doesn't work. So you go back and tweak the business card, redo the marketing material, try to get another sale. Still doesn't work. It's because you weren't practicing making the sale. And you've spent 0 time practicing that. This is one of the biggest wastes of time in business and in life. Getting really good at the wrong thing because you keep running the whole sequence instead of isolating what's actually broken. People work on a funnel. They try to get attention, then nurture, then a click. The click doesn't work. So they go back and they try to get more attention in a different way. There are so many places where you can be working on the wrong thing. And one of the biggest problems in business is knowing how to work on the right thing. So here's how you get predictably good at any skill. First, you try the whole thing. Because why not? If you want to learn to make a sale, try to make a sale. If you want to start a business, try to do whatever the bare minimum version of that would be, and just do it. Because sometimes you've accumulated enough other skill sets in your life that you're ready for whatever you're attempting, and it just works. Hyper-confident people do this, and they get what people call lucky breaks, because they just try things. And you'll never get a lucky break if you don't give yourself the opportunity to get one. So regardless of whether you're confident or not, just try it and see if it works. But if you try it and it doesn't work, then focus completely on step 1. Practice it until you can do it without thinking about anything else. Then, and here's the important thing most people don't know that makes you learn faster than everyone else, set step 1 aside and find a way to do nothing but focus on step 2. If you're learning sales and you've gotten good at breaking the ice, and you need to get good at step 2 of finding the pain points, have as many conversations as possible with as much time as possible spent on finding pain points. Ask your friends what they're struggling with. Ask strangers. Ask your prospective buyers more questions than necessary. Just do that and forget about the fact that you're going to be learning a sequence of events later. If you've learned the first 3 notes of a piece of music, stop playing the first 3 notes of the piece of music and focus on the next 3. Then, once you understand step 2, you practice step 1 and 2 together until it feels like one thing. In sales, this would be repeating breaking the ice and finding pain points. In music, it would be playing the first group of notes and then the next. In software, this would be the first step of the user journey and then the next. You focus on learning 1. Once you've learned 1, you stop working on 1 and work on 2. Once you've learned 2, then you work on the connection between 1 and 2. At this point, you try the whole thing again, because you might know enough to nail the whole thing. But if you can't nail the whole thing on your first try, you set it aside again. In fact, once steps 1 and 2 are so easy to perform that it's easier for you to do both than it used to be to do step 1, then set that whole batch aside and focus on step 3. Forget about 1 and 2. Only work on 3. Once you know 3 extremely well, start working on 4. Once you have 4 down, work on 3 and 4 together. At this point, try the whole thing again. Now you have a much higher likelihood of success because you've done each step individually, but you might not be there yet. Beginners get stuck because they try to do step 1, 2, step 1, 2, 3, stopping and restarting over and over at the point where they're not making progress because they have too much stuff they're working on at once. There's too much wasted time in restarting when they should have just focused on the one point they're messing up. What I've taught you so far fixes that and gets you to an intermediate skill level. But once you reach the intermediate skill level, you've learned something called identities. You've learned to identify steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 as individual identities so that you can absorb them separately. The next step that gets you to an advanced level is to now practice connections. And to do this, you forget 1 and 2, forget 3 and 4, and practice the transition between 2 and 3. So in sales, with break the ice, identify the need, present the offer, and handle the objections, you would practice transitioning from identifying the need to presenting the offer. In music, you'd go from practicing the second group of notes to practicing the third. In martial arts, you'd practice the second punch and then the third. In a SaaS product, you'd smooth out the customer journey between the second step and the third. Then you would practice 1, 2, 3, and then 2, 3, 4. What this is all possible iterations of those steps and all possible connections between them. Once you can successfully do every single one of these things, you can't not do the skill you're trying to learn. If you have 4 notes you need to play, and you can play note 1, note 2, note 3, note 4, note 1, 2, note 3, 4, note 2, 3, note 1, 2, 3, note 2, 3, 4, once you can do all of those things, you can't not play it. There's nothing left but competence. This is the elimination of ignorance. And at this point, you might say, yeah, but life is hard, and what if I still can't do it? And the beauty of this process is that it gives you a very clear answer to that question. If you've gone through this process and you still can't do it, then you aren't zoomed into the process enough, and you're missing a step somewhere. One of the steps that you perceive as one step is actually a series of multiple steps itself that you need to break down further and do this same process with. Once a human goes through a series of steps in this manner, the feedback is unquestionable. For example, if you're in business and you're trying to get people's attention, then get them to click, then get them to absorb more information and click again, and that's not happening, somewhere along the way, there's a point where they needed to absorb more information, or they needed to be directed to a click more specifically, or you needed to get more attention. There's no way that's not true. There was a separation between one of these points. You got their attention, but then they're not clicking. Well, with that attention, did you get them to absorb enough information right here to click? No, then they're not going to click. What you just discovered is, oh, I was thinking about it in terms of I'm going to get people to watch my content and then I'll make another piece of content that makes them click. Well, the problem is nobody who watched that first piece of content watched the other piece of content that made them click. Instead, this piece of content that got everybody's attention actually needs to provide the information that makes them click. If you're working on something and you're viewing it as a series of steps and you've done all of this and it's not working, then now you know you've missed steps and you need to break it into smaller ones. I use music as the analogy because I was a music teacher for many years. And you might think, for example, I'm going to play 8 notes because my skill level is such that I know I can play these 8 notes in one go. That's step 1. And step 2 is another 8 notes. But if it's not working, you need to zoom in and focus on only the one block of 8 notes, or 4, or even 1 again. If you're learning the sales process and you're struggling to identify pain points, you have to break the process of identifying pain points into multiple steps. Zoom in and ask an opening question that gets them talking about their situation. Listen for the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Ask a follow-up question that makes them feel the pain of that gap, and then get them to say the problem out loud in their own words. Now you're zooming into this single step of identifying pain points and turning it into a linear skill you can practice. Once again, you gain the competence, you zoom back out and do it in buckets. You can think of it as a group of 8 notes or 30 to 1,000. The ultra-skilled musician thinks of this in terms of movements of symphonies. You can first think of the skill of sales as the steps of the sales process, then as a series of sales, and then as a series of people you're managing who are a sales team of people doing this. A new business owner thinks of it in terms of steps in a funnel. An experienced business owner thinks of it in terms of multiple quarters of a business, implementing a manufacturing process, or he might think of step 1 as setting up an entire marketing department. The more skilled you are, the more you can think of multiple steps being a single data point in your mind. And the more you struggle, the more you want to zoom in until the process you're going through becomes a series of easily solvable steps. Let's use the example of hiring processes. Let's say you're trying to scale by hiring salespeople. You keep hiring them. They keep failing, and you can't figure out why. The whole thing is hire a salesperson, onboard them, have them start prospecting, close deals. You keep doing this whole cycle. It's taking 3 to 6 months per rep to determine whether or not they're working out. That's a huge amount of time between reps with very little improvement. You're trying to get a running start from 3 miles away. So you zoom in, break it down into steps. Step 1, identify the right candidate. Step 2, get them to accept the offer. Step 3, onboard them onto the product knowledge. Step 4, teach them the sales methodology. Step 5, get them producing qualified pipeline leads. Step 6, get them closing deals. Now, you practice each step separately. Can you identify the right candidate? Interview 20 people. Document the patterns of who works and who doesn't. Create a scorecard. Practice this until you're confident you can identify the right person. Then forget about hiring for a moment. Work on step 3. Can you onboard someone onto the product knowledge that they need to know effectively? Take your current best rep and see if you can level them up on a new product line in a week. Can you do that? No? Then you don't have an onboarding system. Build it, test it, iterate it, then practice the connection. Step 1 and 2 and 3 together. Can you hire someone and get them onboarded in a way where they actually retain the information? Practice this until it feels like one smooth motion. If you're still failing after doing all of this, then one of these steps actually contains multiple steps you haven't identified. This is how you eliminate ignorance and find the actual step that needs to be learned, is doing all of them individually. This is one of the reasons I'm one of the best in the world at helping business owners with bottleneck identification, spotting the actual thing they need to fix, because I know how to break down a skill someone is working on to identify which step they're actually struggling with. Business is a skill, and how you learn one thing is how you learn everything. And if you'd like to work with me, the link's in the description. Now, I said earlier that this is also connected to the path of enlightenment, and I wasn't exaggerating. This is the linear application of the same framework I taught in the previous video. You can watch it here, which is to connect every fact you know to every other fact you know, and apply every fact you know. When that process of connecting two things expands to more things, it starts to look like this. But it's all learning identities, which is learning to identify what something is and how it is different from something else. And it's learning connections, which is learning how something is the same or related. And application, which is the practice of implementing that knowledge in the real world. When you practice step one, you're applying what you know about step one. When you practice step 1 and 2 together, you're connecting step 1 and 2 together and applying the connection. When you practice all possible iterations, you're connecting everything you know and applying it until it becomes one thing, one identity in your mind. And here's how this connects to the process of enlightenment. If you practice two separate things and the connection between them, eventually you'll get to the point where they feel like one. This is the process of noticing the oneness of all things. Differentiation causes education. Connection causes enlightenment. When you identify single points and how they are different from each other, you become educated. When you identify, this is an oak tree because it has smooth leaves, and this is a maple tree because it has serrated leaves, you are becoming educated. When you realize they're both trees, you're becoming enlightened. When you identify the difference between getting somebody's attention and getting somebody to click, you are becoming educated. When you see the path from getting somebody's attention to getting someone to click so well that it seems like one skill, that's enlightenment. When you see yourself as yourself and you learn that your partner is not like you, thus enabling you to relate to them better, you become educated. When you see how they are like you and you see how their differences connect you to them, you become enlightened. Once you see all of the differences of the universe, you become the most educated you can be. Once you see all of the connections between all of the pieces of the universe, and you see the oneness of everything, you are enlightened. This is the process of human growth. Learning individuality and connection at ever-increasing scale. If this has been useful to you, then your constraint isn't your business anymore. It's you. I work one-on-one with high-end founders, executives, and influencers who want to improve their mental state and performance. I help the one who helps the many. If you can help many people, then I can help you. Link is in the description. Most people get stuck at a level way below where they should be. Don't be like most people. Learn to practice individual skills and the steps between them. Do this, and you won't just get better at one thing. You'll get better at everything you do. If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe for more. I'm Josh Terry. I help founders learn how to learn until they become unstoppable.